St. Petersburg. A man consumes enough potassium cyanide to kill an entire regiment, yet he continues to smile and breathe. Beneath the thick ice of the Malaya Nevka, a dark secret waits for the morning sun to reveal a truly monstrous betrayal. High society assassins tremble in the shadows, realizing their victim might be something far more terrifying than a mere mortal peasant man. The Okrana secret police tracked his every move, documenting a life of religious ecstasy mixed with the most depraved midnight scandals. This is the story of Grigori Rasputin, the mystical healer who gripped the Russian Empire's throat until the nobility decided to strike. Born in the frozen wasteland of Pokrovskoye, a common peasant rose from the mud to manipulate the most powerful throne in Europe. After a spiritual awakening at 28, Rasputin abandoned his family to wander Russia as a self-proclaimed holy man with hypnotic eyes. In 1905, the desperate Empress Alexandra summoned the mystic to save her son, Alexei, who was bleeding internally from incurable hemophilia. Medical science failed, but Rasputin's rhythmic prayers stopped the boy's bleeding, instantly making the monk indispensable to the Romanov imperial family. The peasant now held the keys to the empire, whispering political advice that dictated the fates of millions across the Russian territory. But the holy man led a double life, fueled by cheap vodka and a constant stream of high society women seeking spiritual cleansing. Secret police agents known as the Staircase Notes team recorded his visits to brothels while he claimed to be performing miracles. On May 12th, surveillance teams watched as he trapped a woman in his flat, showcasing the predatory nature beneath his robes. The Russian press risked heavy censorship fines just to print rumors of the mad monk and his corrupting influence over the throne. Vladimir Purishkevich stood before the Duma, screaming that the dark forces surrounding the Empress were leading the great Russian Empire to ruin. Felix Yusupov, the wealthiest man in Russia, listened intently, realizing that the only way to save the monarchy was through blood. 1 week later, a group of conspirators met inside a secluded train car to finalize the neutralization of Russia's most hated man. The group included a Grand Duke, a doctor, and a politician, all united by a singular violent purpose to eliminate Rasputin. The chosen kill zone was the Moika Palace, a labyrinthine estate where the thick stone walls would swallow any screams of terror. They transformed a cold storage basement into a lavish dining room, creating a deceptive sanctuary designed to lure a hungry predator. Dr. Lazavert meticulously laced chocolate cakes with enough cyanide to kill several men, ensuring the monk's demise would be swift and silent. The plan required surgical precision, with a car positioned to shield the target from the prying eyes of the secret police. After the neutralization, they planned to transport the inert form to the Petrovsky Bridge and vanish the evidence into the icy depths. To lure him, Yusupov exploited Rasputin's lust, promising an introduction to his beautiful wife, Princess Irina, who was actually miles away. Rasputin, blinded by his own ego and desire, accepted the invitation, unaware that he was dressing for his very own funeral. The night arrived with a bone-chilling frost as the conspirators took their positions, their hearts racing with the weight of treason. Upstairs, they played a gramophone to simulate a lively party, masking the deadly silence of the basement where the trap was set. The wine was poisoned, the cakes were lethal, and the executioners waited with bated breath for the arrival of their mystical guest. At nearly 1 a.m, the heavy car crunched over the snow, delivering the target to the threshold of his doom. Rasputin entered the cellar, his presence filling the small space with an aura of power that made even the assassins hesitate momentarily. The men upstairs listened through the floorboards, waiting for the sound of a body hitting the ground, but only conversation echoed. To Yusupov's horror, Rasputin devoured the poisoned cakes with high spirits, showing absolutely no signs of distress or impending physical failure. Panic gripped the conspirators as the minutes ticked by, the supernatural resilience of the monk defying every law of medical science. With the poison failing, Yusupov drew a heavy mechanical object, realizing that only lead could end the life of the immortal monk. The heavy mechanical object discharges a silent, lethal force, sending a shockwave through the cold, stagnant air of the basement. Rasputin's form on ground impacts the stone floor with a heavy thud, his body becoming instantly inert and eerily still. Upstairs, the four men freeze in place, the sudden violence echoing through the floorboards like a dark, final punctuation mark. They descend into the cellar, their polished boots clicking against the stone as they surround the fallen mystic in the shadows. Dr. Lazavert reaches down with trembling fingers, confirming that the man who survived poison has finally succumbed to kinetic energy. One by one, the lamps are extinguished, plunging the crime scene into a cold, noir darkness that hides their grim work. Three conspirators rush toward the waiting car, their silhouettes blending into the freezing night as they begin the next phase. Lieutenant Sukhotin dons Rasputin's heavy fur coat, acting as a decoy to mislead any secret police watching from the distant shadows. At the train station, they frantically shove silk garments into a small stove, but the thick fabric refuses to catch fire. Back at the Moika Palace, Yusupov stands alone with the body, his mind spiraling as he stares at the motionless form. Suddenly, a single eye of the mannequin snaps open, fixed upon Yusupov with a terrifying, vengeful intensity that defies all logic. The supposedly inert man lunges upward, his fingers locking around Yusupov's throat in a final, desperate burst of supernatural physical strength. Rasputin staggers out into the snowy courtyard, his movements erratic and heavy, leaving a trail of viscous, dark, aesthetic fluid behind. Purishkevich realizes the horror and gives chase, his own mechanical tool raised as he screams into the empty, freezing night air. Two discharges of energy strike the stone walls, sending sparks flying into the darkness as Rasputin nears the heavy iron gates. Two unidentified figures walking nearby stop in their tracks, witnessing the flashes of light before vanishing back into the urban fog. Two more shots ring out, finding their mark in the mystic's back and head, finally forcing his body to collapse again. Rasputin falls at the very edge of freedom, his form now truly inert against the pristine white snow of the courtyard. Two palace guards emerge from the gloom, their faceless heads nodding in grim approval as they realize the target is neutralized. The soldiers heave the heavy form onto a thick velvet curtain, wrapping it tightly to hide the evidence of the struggle. Inside, Yusupov is consumed by a violent hysteria, his elegant composure shattered by the impossible resilience of the man he killed. A local policeman named Vlasyuk knocks on the door, drawn by the sound of gunfire echoing through the silent, aristocratic district. Purishkevich fabricates a story about a drunken friend shooting a dog, successfully deceiving the officer into leaving the palace grounds immediately. The rest of the gang returns in the black car, frustrated that their attempt to burn the evidence was a failure. They lift the heavy curtain-wrapped bundle into the vehicle, the weight straining the suspension as they prepare for the final disposal. The car creeps through the desolate streets of St. Petersburg, heading toward the frozen river under the cover of the morning. On the Petrovsky Bridge, they use heavy chains and weights to ensure the body remains hidden at the bottom of the river. With a collective heave, they push the bundle into the dark, swirling water, watching as the ice hole swallows the mystery. In their frantic haste, they fail to notice a single boot resting on the bridge, a silent witness to the night's events. Back at the palace, they try to scrub the viscous, dark, aesthetic fluid from the snow, but the stains are permanent. As dawn breaks, passers-by discover a trail of dark fluid leading to the bridge, prompting an immediate investigation by the authorities. Divers descend into the frigid depths, searching for the man whose disappearance has already begun to shake the foundations of the empire. They find Rasputin's form trapped beneath the ice, his lungs filled with water, suggesting he fought for life even after being submerged. The conspirators are cast out of Russia, their desperate act failing to save the monarchy from the coming storm of revolution. Dr. Kosarotov begins the autopsy on the frozen form, searching for the true cause of the mystic's impossible and legendary resilience. Forensic evidence suggests the lethal cyanide never reached his system, or perhaps his chronic gastritis had neutralized the chemical reaction entirely. The most haunting discovery was the presence of water in the lungs, proving he was still breathing when thrown into the river. Empress Alexandra falls into a state of hysterical mourning, convinced that the shield protecting her family has been permanently shattered. In the dead of night, they bury the most hated man in Russia in a secret location to prevent public desecration. Tsar Nicholas receives the news of the assassination while at the front, realizing his authority is crumbling along with his empire. With Rasputin gone, the public's anger does not fade. Instead, it refocuses entirely on the royal family and the starving city. Politicians realize the neutralization of the mystic was not enough to save the system. As the February Revolution begins to spark, the Tsar finally signs the document that ends 3 centuries of Romanov rule, fulfilling the very catastrophe Rasputin had once predicted. The new provisional government orders the exhumation of Rasputin's remains, fearing his grave would become a site for monarchist pilgrimages. The body is loaded into a truck and driven toward the outskirts of the city, destined for a final, fiery end. In a clearing at Piskaryovka, the soldiers build a massive pyre to ensure that nothing remains of the man they feared. Witnesses claimed the body sat up in the fire, a terrifying sight caused by the heat contracting his powerful leg tendons. His ashes are scattered to the Siberian winds, intended to erase his memory from the face of the Russian earth forever. Felix Yusupov lives out his days in Paris, writing memoirs that would cement his version of the assassination in history. In 1932, Yusupov sues a major film studio for their portrayal of his wife, winning a landmark case for personality rights. Grand Duke Dmitri finds himself in America, a prince without a country, forever haunted by the blood on his hands. The Romanovs meet their end in a basement in Yekaterinburg, a mirror image of the cellar where they sent Rasputin. Before his death, Rasputin wrote a prophetic letter, warning that if he was killed by nobles, the monarchy would fall. His words became a curse that dismantled an empire, proving that his influence was more powerful in death than life. The Bolsheviks seize control, burying the old Russia under a tide of red ink and radical new ideologies. Today, the relics of Rasputin's life are preserved in museums, silent witnesses to a story that still captivates the world. In his birthplace of Pokrovskoye, the legend of the holy man remains a mixture of local pride and historical shame. The Moika Palace still stands, its stone walls keeping the secrets of that December night locked away in the shadows. Was he a holy healer or a corrupt manipulator who single-handedly destroyed a dynasty from the inside out? The truth lies somewhere in the middle, hidden within the accounts of those who sought to neutralize his influence. Historians continue to debate the extent of his power, yet no one can deny the magnetism of his dark legend. The images of the past burn away, leaving only the myth of the man who could not be killed easily. The river that claimed his life still flows through the heart of the city, carrying the weight of Russian history. We see the past through the lens of those who survived, but the ghost of Rasputin remains ever present and watchful. Some say his spirit still haunts the corridors of the Moika, a reminder of the night that changed Russia forever. The story of Grigori Rasputin ends here, but the questions he raised about power and faith will never be answered. Russia has moved on, yet the shadow of its most hated man continues to loom over its dark and storied past. Thank you for watching this investigation into the life and neutralization of the man they called the Mad Monk. Dr. Kosarotov's forensic report noted a third discharge point in the center of the forehead, suggesting a final execution-style kinetic strike. Rumors began to circulate in diplomatic circles that a British intelligence officer named Oswald Rayner was present during the dark events. In London, secret files were buried to hide any foreign involvement in the destabilization of the failing Russian imperial throne. The Empress Alexandra remained locked in her rooms, convinced that the death of her friend signaled the end of her dynasty. Public celebrations in the streets of St. Petersburg were short-lived as bread riots and revolutionary fervor began to consume the city. The provisional government later attempted to erase his memory by exhuming his remains and incinerating them in a remote forest clearing. Witnesses claimed the mannequin's tendons contracted in the heat, making the charred form appear to sit up one last time. Years later in Paris, Felix Yusupov lived in a state of haunted luxury, constantly retelling his version of the night. His wife, Irina, successfully sued a major film studio in 1932 over a fictionalized and insulting portrayal of her character. This legal battle forced Hollywood to adopt the all persons fictitious disclaimer that remains standard in the modern film industry. Meanwhile, Rasputin's daughter, Maria, fled to America and reinvented herself as a professional lion tamer in the famous traveling circus. She claimed her father's mystical gaze gave her the power to control the most dangerous predators in the world's center stage. Back in Russia, the Ipatiev house basement became the final destination for the Romanovs, fulfilling the dark prophecy of the monk. The transition from an empire to a Soviet state was paved with the shadows of the man they could not kill. Modern forensic science still debates the cyanide mystery, as the sugar in the cakes may have neutralized the lethal chemical. Today, the relics of Rasputin's life are preserved, and the Moika Palace serves as a grim reminder of his influence. The myth of Rasputin remains more powerful than the man himself, a ghost that continues to haunt the Russian collective memory. History has labeled him a monster, but the truth remains buried beneath the frozen currents of the deep Neva River. Every detail of that night has been analyzed by scholars, yet the full truth remains elusive and shrouded in mystery. Visitors from around the world come to stand in the very room where the empire began its final violent collapse. Felix Yusupov took his secrets to the grave, leaving behind a memoir that many believe was a work of calculated fiction. Maria Rasputin lived a life as strange as her father's, bridging the gap between Siberian mysticism and American show business. In the end, the peasant from Pokrovskoye achieved a dark immortality that no king or emperor could ever truly grasp. His presence acted as a catalyst, accelerating the destruction of a system that was already rotting from the inside out. The official story remains the one written by the killers, but the redacted files tell a far more complex tale. The Neva River keeps its secrets well, flowing silently past the palaces and prisons of a city that never forgets. Time has a way of turning villains into legends and facts into myths, blurring the lines of historical reality. The world of the Romanovs vanished almost overnight, leaving behind only the ghosts of those who tried to save it. Whether he was a saint or a devil, Rasputin remains the most enigmatic figure in the history of the great empire. The physical remnants of his life are few, but his influence is felt in every chapter of the Russian Revolution. We are left to wonder if the neutralization of one man truly changed the course of history or merely delayed it. The story of Russia's most hated man is a testament to the power of belief, fear, and the weight of legacy. The investigation is complete. The shadows have spoken. Thank you for witnessing the end of the mystical healer.